Hi, everybody. Welcome to Purpose People. We've got Andrea from Ideas on Stage, and we're going to share a little bit about his journey and how he turned a side hustle into a fully fledged business. So, Andrea, thanks so much for coming, driving all the way up from London just to be on our podcast. We're honored to have you here.
Of course. No, the honor is mine. Thank you very much, Doug. Looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. So, you obviously help people present better. That's the key thing. And I met you by being a judge on one of your summits. And met people from all over the world, which is incredible. So, just tell us a little bit about your company and what it does, and then we'll find and discover the journey of how you got there.
Yeah. So at Ideas on Stage, we are a presentation skills, public speaking training company, and I'm the head of Ideas on Stage in the UK. And the reason why we do what we do, like personally, is because the reason why I'm so passionate about public speaking is because when I was a little kid growing up in Italy, I grew up in a family of very small business owners. My parents have always been running their own very small business together. They still do. And so as a kid, first of all, I saw the challenges because raising 4 kids while trying to run a business is not
so where
easy.
are you in the pecking order? Are you oldest, youngest?
I'm the third one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. But I also saw their spark, their entrepreneurial mindset, their proactive approach to life. And so that's why I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, to run my own thing. Now, I don't know about you, Dara, but in reality for me, that remained a dream for a long time. Because before doing what I do now, I tried many things, started many projects. All of them failed. Okay. But it was useful because in that process, what I realized was that there are so many great ideas that fail, not because of the ideas themselves. Often the ideas are wonderful, it's just because of the way we communicate them. And that's why, to cut it short, then eventually I became a presentation coach. That's why my mission today is to stop great ideas from failing just because of the way we present them. And at Ideas on Stage, our mission is to help hundreds of thousands of purpose-driven entrepreneurs, business leaders share their message so they can grow their business, increase their influence, and why not make a positive impact in the world.
And this is really interesting because for me, when I was at an event, it's a dinner event, and they were talking about how people won their biggest client. And they said that out of a room of 100 people, when they were saying how they won their biggest client, this is agency owners, 90% of the people in that room said they won their biggest client through public speaking, which is incredible. And that took me on this journey of, so rather than being faceless and hiding and get uncomfortable by being in front of the camera and, write a book and all that sort of, and that began my journey once I got that fact. Now, it took me a while, but it became more than just about building a creative agency. It became more about making things happen.
And what you realized there was that you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you can't communicate it, I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter. And that's why I do what I do. The main reason why, Daryl, is because I get frustrated when I see great ideas, fantastic ideas failing or getting lost, not being remembered, not being accepted, not being implemented. Again, not because of the ideas, but just because of the way we pitch them, present them, communicate them. And I get even more frustrated, and I know that we are very much aligned, when we are talking about ideas that have the power, even in a small way, to change the world, to make the world a better place.
So whereabouts in Italy were you from?
In a small town, in a small region, opposite Rome that nobody knows in the East Coast. So it's a lovely town in the East Coast on the seaside, but it's not a famous one.
Oh no, I'd say that because we got Italians in our family. It's on my dad's side, so his mum's from an Italian family, and they're all from northern Italy. But yeah, we've been to Italy a few times. I proposed in Venice, been to Rome, and been to Sicily. We love Sicily, by the way. That's awesome as well. So. Yeah, Italy's cool. We love the place.
Yeah, Italy is cool. The UK is cool as well. I'm very
Just not as much sun.
No. You need to take more vitamin D, like in a synthetic way. But no, I love it. I moved to Ireland first.
Okay.
In 2009 maybe. That was my first experience abroad in Ireland. And then maybe for you, things are very different. For me, coming from Italy, Ireland, the UK are quite similar for me.
Yeah,
I hope
yeah.
I'm not offending anybody.
No, you're fine. No.
But because I loved it so much, I said, you know what? I think I could live either in Ireland or in the UK. So then after that, I had an opportunity to do an internship in Cambridge here in the UK.
Yeah.
Loved it. And then I said, I want to stay here. And so then from Cambridge, London, it's been more than 10 years now.
So that journey, so when you obviously came, you came from Cambridge and stuff like that, what was your sort of like job roles that you took on? Because obviously what you're doing now wasn't the main thing at the time, and it began a little bit differently. So just tell us what your main role was, and then tell us the journey, how you went from there to what you're doing now.
Yeah. So after the internship, then I started working for Bosch. You may know the company, multinational, big company. Most people know it for washing machines and things like that. I was in the automotive industry, and I didn't care about cars. And that was one of the reasons why now I do something different. But I was working in sales.
You're an Italian that doesn't care about cars. That's crazy.
I do like Ferrari.
There you go, of course. Yeah.
Or Lamborghini, but no, it's not my passion. For me, it's just a tool to get from A to B. It's a very useful tool, but don't care about engines and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm not an engineer either. And so I was working in sales, different roles, but always in a commercial team, in a commercial environment. And it was useful. But again, the main thing was the theme of this podcast, purpose. For me, it wasn't just the purpose was missing. For me, not for the company, but for me, there was no alignment in terms of the purpose.
Yeah.
Not only that, I wasn't passionate about cars. Once I remember, we were doing a team building activity, and I was with my boss, and there was my boss's boss, who was the executive vice president for Bosch in the UK. So from an operational perspective, the number one in the UK. Mm. And I told during an activity, I told this person, look, I don't give a shit about cars. I don't care about cars. It's not my passion. And my boss took me and she said, look, because she knew it. We had a very transparent relationship. And she said, look, you can say that to me, but you don't have to be 100% honest and transparent with everybody, including the vice president. And I said, okay, that's me. So, but you see, it was clear that there was
a misalignment on that journey. Yeah.
And so then, as I was working for Bosch, I was already super passionate about presentation skills. That started at university. My passion for presentation started at university. Because at uni, you need to present, they ask you work on a project, you need to present it to your students, your friends. And I read a book that changed my life, Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds.
Okay.
And that book was the first one that opened my eyes to what it really means to create and deliver powerful presentations. It made me understand that a presentation, if you do it well, is so much more than just PowerPoint. When I say PowerPoint, I'm not talking about the presentation tool. I'm talking about the idea that if you present well, then you have an opportunity to achieve your objective, grow your business, increase your influence, make a positive impact in the world. So much more than just putting together some slides.
But you can see, that was the thing with me. It's like when I began this sort of journey, I was used to presenting work as an art director. So you'd almost go, look at this screen. So you're not actually engaging the audience. They're all looking at the screen. And, when it was a case of the speakers that I engage with the most is when I'm talking to them and it doesn't matter what's on the screen. And that was the shift I learned, is that although I was comfortable when doing that, I was really uncomfortable when doing this. And it was doing this what I had to do. Because I could make that look great. But I realized that actually, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, the keynote or the PowerPoint, it becomes a bit of a crux. It's almost like from note reading, it's like the next level up because it looks nicer, and you'll see PowerPoints where they've got all their notes written on there as well, and it looks terrible. There should just be prompts, right? And I'm sure you teach that. But it was a real shift for me to realize that actually people buy into people, not the presentation.
You are the presentation, not your slides. Of course, PowerPoint, keynote, it can be really useful to amplify and reinforce and support your message. But what you understood was you wanted to make a good connection with the audience. You don't do it with your slides. They can be helpful, but you are the presentation. And so then because I was passionate about this, then while I was working for Bosch, then I started helping others improve their presentation skills. At the beginning, it was just a hobby.
Yeah.
And then it was one client and then another one. But although I have to say that to do that for some time, I did something that I would never do again. I mean, at the time, it was useful, but I would wake up at 4:45 every single morning. Then for a few hours, I would work on my hobby/business presentation.
Okay, yeah.
Then Bosch, say 9 to 5, the usual corporate role. And then from 5 p.m. to maybe 9, 10 p.m., again, back to the business, to my hobby, my business.
Yeah.
So it was very, very intense, extreme. But the reason why I do what I do now, and the reason why I was able to turn this passion into an actual profession, if you want, is also because of the experience.
Yeah, it's being able to be passionate about what you really want to do. And maybe, some people like just go all boots in and quit and walk away. But it's using your time effectively, and I think a lot of people don't realize that there's time before you when you wake up to actually start, and there's time there. And there's time afterwards. So rather than that box set or whatever it is, or that long film, you could take an hour, 2 hours. And one of the other companies I set up was literally, we met every Tuesday evening for 1 hour. That's all we did.
That's it.
And yet we built this business called Humans because of that discipline. So we meet every Tuesday, 1 hour, and we keep it to an hour and we're done. But we've made a lot of progress and created a company just by doing that. And so it's not like you have to quit your job entirely or you have to sacrifice everything to do it. But ultimately, if you want to do the thing that you really want to do, like purpose, so to speak, then you're going to have to put those sacrifices in place.
Yeah, and so it's amazing what you've done with Humans. Just one Tuesday, an hour every week. For me, it was a very gradual approach because there was one step. Then the next step was I asked my boss. I was very honest. They knew that this is what I wanted to do, and I need to thank them because I said, here is what I do, but I'm not ready yet. I don't have a huge, don't have a big enough audience now. Don't have so many clients that I wasn't ready to quit and go full time doing what I do now. So I said, what if for a year I work part time for you? And then, so we said I could work 3 days a week here at Bosch, and then the rest I could try and build the business for real. And I need to thank them because they said yes. Let's do it. And so for a year, then I was doing that part time, presentation training part time, and then after that I said, okay, now it's time to go all in.
But what I like about that is you were brave enough to have that conversation. So other people just don't have that conversation. And again, a business partner, he's had that conversation with his company, and a similar thing, they've gave him a little bit of time and a bit of flex. So there's no conflict of interest there. And I think for me, it's being brave enough to have those conversations where if you want to live the life that you want to live, you're going to have to do the things that you don't necessarily want to do, which is natural to everyday living. And I think, it's where that vision becomes much bigger than what you're doing now, where it begins, I just got to do it. I just got to go in.
You feel something, right? Like every night I was going to sleep and I don't know how to describe it, but I had a fire in my belly and I had to do it. And for me, there was something, maybe, now that I think about it, the reason why, because you said, okay, you were brave enough to do it. I don't know if I was brave to do it, but for me, there was something worse than having that conversation. I didn't want to get to a point of my life, maybe now or in 10 years from now, with the regret, what if I had that, if I had done that conversation, or what if I tried to do what I wanted to do and I didn't do it? I didn't want to live with that regret. That was much more powerful. That motivation was much more powerful.
The regret. Yeah. And what I find interesting, because obviously you coming from Italy and whatever, you're doing presentation skills, and English is not your first language. which you do a very good job of, by the way. So how did you overcome those challenges? Did you have to sharpen up, or you just got a natural, appetite to learn languages, or how did it work?
No, thank you. And I was thinking about that. I was talking to somebody else a few days ago about this particular thing, because it's true. I mean, my English is not perfect, and most likely will never be.
It's better than mine.
No. I will always have my Italian accent, which is fine. But you see, and a lot of people could say, for example, that there is another person who wants to do what I do, presentation skills, communication, public speaking, and that person is not native English, and then that could be seen as a barrier. But if we think about it, it's not. I'm not the one. Yes, I give presentations for my business, of course, all the time. Yes, I do things like this. Yeah. And as long as you can understand and you can make yourself understood, that's enough in most cases. Yes, of course, the better you speak, the better the experience for everybody. But when I work with my clients, I'm not the one then giving the presentation. I work behind the scenes. Yeah. They are the spotlight is on them, or even better, I would say, on their ideas. And so in most cases, we work with me, my colleagues, we work behind the scenes. So as long as you can have a conversation, a coaching session with a client to help them, to take them through a process for them to be able to develop a compelling message and then deliver it effectively, then your English doesn't have to be perfect for you to be able to do that.
Yeah. So in that journey, obviously you're working for Bosch. You've made that decision. What was it that fear of, not fear is probably the wrong word, but was it that sense of regret you tuned into it, that you realized that actually years are passing by? What was that pivot, that thing that just said, you know what, I'm just going to start it? What was that thing that made you wake up one day and said, you know what, I'm gonna start doing this?
Maybe a couple of things. On the one hand, then you get to a point where you've built some experience, also professional experience, personal experience, life experience. So I was not 20 years old anymore. Maybe I was getting closer to my 30s. And so that meant that I had, for everybody's different. For me, I had to have enough experience to be able to then say, okay, now you know what, I can do really good. I can do a good job, even if I don't have a salary, even if I don't have to do something for somebody else. I've got the skills now. I've got the experience to be able to do all of the things that you need to do to build a business, like many things you need to do. So maybe that's one thing. Perhaps the most important one, though, we were talking about kids. At the time, I didn't have kids. I have a 7-month-old son now. Wow. And I knew I wanted to have kids. And I also thought, and I knew that if you want to start a business from scratch, at least that was for me, Dara, I don't know about you, then if you don't have kids, it's a bit easier.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because you got more responsibilities, you see, and there's that,
more time as well.
Yeah. But it's that pressure, right? You know, I think for me, my pivot point was 27, where I got to a career that was successful on paper, but the clients that we were working with were ending people's life rather than celebrating them. So I'm starting again. You know, we were talking about patterns earlier. The more people we interview, the more we see that it's definitely a pivot point, and it's normally sort of like late 20s, early 30s where that pivot point happens.
That's what happened to me.
You know, mine was 27. You were probably
maybe 29 or 30, 31. I don't remember, but and then I thought, okay, most likely, at least that was the idea. We would, with my wife, we would like to have kids, and so if I don't do it now, and it's connected to the regret as well, but if I don't do it now, then if in a couple of years, and that's what happened, in 3 years we're going to have kids, then it's going to be much harder to put in the work and do what you have to do to try and kick it off. Yeah. And so that mental thing, that thought of, okay, We're going to have kids. Now I can do it. Now I've got much more time. Like, for example, now with our son, it would be impossible for me to do what I've done in that period, like part-time, 2 things, unless you want to destroy your family. That's not what you want to do.
No, exactly. But that's interesting, because you often find that happen where they do, and it destroys the family. So you might have this amazing business, but then you the person that backed you when you were no one heard of you, gets discarded for the quest of fame and fortune and stuff. And I think building the right way, and I think you made the right. For me, it's like building the right way is being able to take your family with you on that journey. And I think the foresight you had is, let me start it now.
Yeah.
I think it's if you are starting it with children and you've got them in, then you just need the right people around you to help support and undergird and make that to happen. Also say this is that not everybody will set their own company up. But then if they're going to go after that dream role, it might require more of them, so it's just finding that right balance, isn't it, at the end of the day?
And you were talking about trigger moments. Now, there was also, again, now that I think about it, there was a conversation I had with my wife at the time that was super important for me. We were living on our own, and she of course, we were talking about my passion, my dream. And one night she told me, look, do it. Just give it a try. If it doesn't work, if we need to go back living with 10 other people, or never done it, but if we need to go, if we need to share because we don't have the money, it doesn't work, and we need to share an apartment with 10 other people, we'll do it. And that was, for me, wow, that was so powerful.
Just the backing.
Yeah. It's okay. If my wife says that, then wow, that was, I tell her, that conversation was powerful, because then, okay, tomorrow, then I'm going to do it.
So my conversation happened with my then girlfriend, who then became my wife 9 months later. And we did life, and we go through the ups and downs of life and living, but we know regardless of whatever happens, we got each other and we got our family. And I think that's a massive help in that quest and that journey.
The main thing.
Purpose. Yeah. So let's talk about the helping people present better and that type of stuff. So what sort of people come to you, or, when that you help get to where they need to get to, and why are these skills so important, maybe for a business owner or a CEO or a director of a company? So just share a little bit about your sort of like demographic.
Yeah, mainly we are talking about entrepreneurs, business owners, or business leaders and their teams who want to become more confident presenters. And the reason why that's important is because, again, if you think about many different contexts, it could be an external presentation to a potential client, an internal presentation to your team, an investor pitch. You can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you can't present it effectively, it doesn't matter. And a presentation, Daryl, is a bit like a first date. Often it's an opportunity to make a great first impression.
Yeah.
And the problem I see is that so many people and companies make the big mistake of making an invisible first impression when presenting. So it's not that they make a bad first impression, although sometimes they do, but often they don't make a good first impression either. It's just invisible. And so what we do when we work with our clients with these often it's also purpose-driven entrepreneurs, those who have a product, a service, an idea that goes, and the idea behind it goes beyond just making money. Of course, yes, we need to make money. Profit is there, but it has to be more than that. And
impact, cause, 100%.
And so if you've got the idea, then they recognize that what makes a difference, if you want to be able to present an idea effectively, is you need often, not always, but often you need to get access to some sort of an external perspective.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, this is the number one problem in communication I see. Often we know so much about a subject, about our idea. We are also so close to it that we think that, first of all, we think that everything is important.
Yeah.
And so we think that we need to communicate everything. But if everything is important, then nothing is important for the audience. That's one thing. We often also think, and again, we are talking about experienced people, business owners, entrepreneurs, business leaders. We think that what we are communicating is simple and clear and engaging for the audience. Often the experience is the opposite. It's confusing.
Yeah.
And in communication, it's very simple. If we confuse, we lose. We lose our audience. We lose their attention. We lose them, not just during the presentation, but we lose them for good. And this is the number one problem in communication. And people who recognize that maybe they are suffering from this situation, then they decide to get that external perspective. Now, that external perspective could be working with a presentation coach. Yeah. It could also be, I'm biased, I think it's the best thing, but it could also be getting feedback from friends, from colleagues, which is better than doing nothing. Although then we need to be careful, because if somebody understands nothing about effective communication, you may want to be careful with the feedback you pay attention to.
Yeah, like if it's your mother, for example, you're the best regardless,
Exactly.
But I think what's interesting is that everybody's presenting all the time. And it's to recognise that certainly with networking and business connecting, what has changed is you've had that ability of maybe having to stand up and do a 60-second pitch or communicate over dinner about what you do. But there's that world of Zoom now as well, which is now another way of presenting, and just even the way that you light stuff, or what's going on. I know people have different backgrounds on or the lights on, and you know what I'm not going to share too much about it, but sometimes you get the most crazy things happen on Zoom where people forget that they're actually on Zoom. And for me, it's understanding that even those Zoom online meetings or even attending to learn, the opportunity to present yourself as well is we kind of like, kind of get away with it, or they put the screen off and they've just got their name. So now you're impersonal, you know what I mean? And what are you trying to hide? Or are you doing 20 other things and not really diving into what's in front of you? So I think presentation has definitely changed with the emergence of social media, the emergence of the online world in terms of online prospecting and stuff like that. That's just as important as being stood and being present in the room.
You're right. We are always presenting all the time. If your sales speech fails to make customers want to buy from you, then your revenues will suffer. If your leadership presentation fails to inspire your team, then they won't be motivated to follow you and deliver on your strategy. If your investor pitch fails to convince investors that your startup, your idea, your project is worth being backed up, then if that's what you need in order to kick it off, it's going to be hard. So what I see is this: the number of presentations we give every day, and you're right, it could be a formal presentation, it could be more of an informal situation where we are communicating our ideas, it could be on Zoom. The number of these situations where we present go up and up.
Yeah.
But the quality of most presentations always go down, down, down. And so I think we don't just have a problem, we have a huge problem. Now, you said that the social media, maybe tools, technology has changed the way we present. And on the one hand, I know what you mean. And of course, there's an impact. On the other hand, I think that it hasn't.
Okay.
I don't know. Would you like me to?
Yeah, of course. Do it. I mean, the main thing I'm saying is, for instance, just to imagine doing something off your phone. Sometimes you're on that phone and you're more conscious of the way that you look rather than focusing on the information that you're giving to the audience.
Yeah.
And you can see it.
No, it's true. There are, of course, there are things, especially from a delivery perspective, because when you think about public speaking, presenting, you've got the delivery side of things.
Yeah.
Eye contact, gestures, body language, posture. We do these things when we work with the clients, although it's not the most important thing. And by the way, online, yes, for example, the way you make eye contact in person, what you should do to make good eye contact in person is different from what you should do for you to be able to make a good connection through your eyes online.
Yeah,
so of course there are, you're right, 100%, there are differences. Yeah. But what I also think that Jeff Bezos once said, that is often asked, what do you think is going to change in the next 10 years? And he says, nobody ever asked me, what do you think is not going to change in the next 10 years? And he says, for me, it's much more important to focus on the things that don't change. Because he says, 10 years from now, I know that people will still want cheap products. They will still want huge selection. They will still want fast delivery. It will never happen that somebody goes to Jeff Bezos in 10 years from now, say, Jeff, Amazon is great. I just wish that your delivery was not so fast. That will never happen.
Yeah.
And he says, if I pay attention to the things that don't change, I know that Amazon will continue to be successful.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to communication, public speaking, presenting, it's the same thing. Of course, you want to have an understanding of how to use the tools, technology, but these things will change. It's inevitable. So for me, it's much more interesting, and that's what we do when we work with our clients, to focus on the things that don't change. Yeah. And in this context, the things that don't change are the fundamental principles of communication.
Yeah.
No, but it will never happen, Daryl, that 10 years from now, you give a presentation and somebody comes to you and say, Daryl, that was a great presentation. I just wish that your message was not so simple for me to understand. Or that it wasn't so, that your storyline was not so clear for me to follow.
Yeah.
Or that your presentation was not so engaging. Or that your message was not, I just wish that your message was not so relevant to me and my needs. That will never happen. So that's why, don't get me wrong, yes, we do want to pay attention to what we can do with Zoom, PowerPoint, Keynote. Now we've got AI, artificial intelligence. Of course, all of these things can amplify and support our ability to get a message across. But for me, what's even more useful are the fundamental principles of communication. I'll tell you just one more thing and then I'll stop here because that's an important subject for me. Aristotle was the first one, more than 2,000 years ago, who gave us the building blocks of effective communication and persuasion. Yeah. And he didn't have PowerPoint. He didn't have Zoom. No. He didn't have Chat GPT.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by, yes, the tools are important.
Yeah, it's the way that we present is essentially, it may change, different canvases, different environments, different places, but the principles of storytelling will always remain. And we've been telling stories for hundreds of years.
And that's the most important thing. Yeah. I'm writing a book at the moment, which is called, the title is Confident Presenter. And people there's a bit of a confusion because when I say confident presenter, people immediately start thinking about your delivery skills. You want to be confident, eye contact, body language. Yeah. No. Yes, these are things that you do want to learn. But in my experience, 80% of your confidence comes from your ability to develop a compelling message. And storytelling is a huge part.
I would also argue it's knowing your subject.
Yeah.
Because I find that people that often struggle to communicate or struggle to do their pitch are almost thinking of themselves performing rather than being authentic to what they know. So the minute you turn it into a performance, then it's like, oh, that's a bit of a challenge. But if you just say, just tell me about you and your business or whatever, it's like this podcast, for example. We get people that have never been in front of the camera before. Like, oh, no, it's the cameras.
I saw an episode recently. You interviewed somebody, I don't remember his name, he had a leather jacket.
James.
And he said it was the first time for him. It was a bit nervous at the beginning, yeah.
But the thing about it is that once you start tapping into them and they start sharing what they know, they forget.
Exactly.
And if you can take that to the stage and just tune into what you know with the knowledge and speak confidently on that, you won't worry about what's there, because I guess in the subconscious is, I might look stupid. But if you're talking about you and your knowledge and your subject that you've maybe spent 10, 15 years doing.
So true. If you know what you are talking about, if you really know, if you are prepared, it doesn't matter where your hands are.
Yeah.
And yes, confidence, a lot of people think that confidence comes from, and I apply it to public speaking, but also in other areas, I guess. A lot of people think that confidence comes from wishful thinking or innate self-belief. It has nothing to do with that. Confidence comes from preparation. It comes from knowing what you're talking about. It comes from familiarity.
Yeah.
The more you do certain things, like you said, James,
James, yeah.
I'm sure that if James has hundreds of these conversations, then at the very end, he will be confident.
Yeah.
So confidence comes from familiarity. Yesterday, I was with my brother, and he showed me a small clip from Kobe Bryant.
Okay.
And he was saying, because the interviewer asked him, every time you, at key moments during the game, you look so confident. You take the shot and you look so confident. And he says, confidence comes from preparation. You will never see me look and appear confident doing something that I haven't done 1,000 times before.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to understand.
I'm a football fan. Are you a football fan?
Yeah, Juventus.
Oh, there we go.
We're not doing well, but what's your team?
Liverpool.
Okay.
And we're not doing well.
But Liverpool, you've done very well over the years.
Yeah. But the key thing, I was listening to an interview with Daniel Sturridge, and he was talking about Nunez, who's a striker for Liverpool. And, he's obviously new. He's learning the ropes, and he gets into positions. Even last week against Arsenal, could have scored 2. But what Daniel Sturridge said is what people don't realise is that when I used to by the time I got to the box, I already knew what finish I was going to do. So he wasn't like looking at where the goalkeeper was. He knew that if I'm stood here, I do this finish, it will go in regardless. And so he said I did it so much that it was subconscious. If I'm on the right side of the hand of the box, I will shoot this way. If I'm on the left-hand side cutting in, I'll shoot this way. It wasn't, look where the goalkeeper is and then I shoot. It was just instinctive. And I think when you're communicating authentically, it's just a natural thing. Your hand gestures, your passion, your heart, your engagement, your ability to get excited naturally flows from you. But when you move into an area that you're not so confident on, you can see the difference between the two.
Yeah, because and the player, because he had done those things 1,000 times before. Now, Daryl, because you mentioned authenticity a couple of times. And again, on the one hand, yes, very important. However, I also need to say that often, at least in my space, public speaking, authenticity is used as an excuse for not improving, for not changing. Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
No, I agree. So what I mean by that is I see authenticity. If you're going to tell a story about a particular principle, even if you use an example, talk about you and how you've applied it. So what you'll find is in business or whatever, someone will have an idea or a flow or a thing. In fact, we're doing a podcast earlier and we're talking about forming, storming, norming, and performing. I can talk about that theoretically, but can I then talk about that as how I applied that in my life and saw the result of that principle playing out? That's what I mean by authenticity.
Yeah.
So taking a principle and say that I've actually used it and this is the proof, that's authentic.
Yeah. And from that perspective, yes, 100%. Yeah. Often, I'll give you a different example.
Yeah, go for it.
Sometimes when we work with our clients, even if I said your delivery is not the most, very important, but it's not the most important thing, we do work on delivery skills. And one thing in particular is you want to try as much as possible when you communicate to avoid, especially in conversations, it's a bit different, but especially in a formal presentation, you want to avoid verbal fillers. Things like
of course.
You know, actually, these are called words. They make you look uncertain.
Yeah.
So that's why you want to try and avoid them. And some people say, even our clients, but you know what? That's me. I want to be myself. I want to be authentic. Now, of course you want to be authentic. Yes, nobody is asking you to become somebody else. But you also want to be the best authentic version of yourself.
Yeah.
It's not about becoming somebody else. It's not about becoming or doing something that's not who you are. You will still be yourself. You are just a better presenter. So
So it'd be like, let's take it back to it'd be like drawing something on a piece of paper, taking a picture of it and stick it on my keynote and said, well, it's the authentic me. It looks terrible. Yeah, you're making judgments. So yeah, absolutely polish up on those thinking noises, the things that you use each time to bide yourself some more time. And even reflection, you can see it a mile off. Someone asks a question, you repeat the question, but once you're in speaking and stuff like that, you start to realize, oh yeah, that person's buying time to answer the question. So I agree 100%. It's still a tool that you need to refine. And I think with public speaking, for example, you will get better at it the more you do it. And the more certain you are on your subject matter, the less you're going to be thinking about, oh, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I guess a great measure of the depth of someone who's being authentic is a Q&A at the end. If they're happy and confident to take the Q&A, you know that they know their subject, which is why people then buy off those people, because they go, it's not theoretical, it's real.
Yeah,
and I think that's so. I agree. There's nothing worse than listening to, if Tony Robbins, for example, and ahed all the time, you wouldn't listen to him. You get fed up with it.
Yeah, and this is just an example. There are many others. And this is also, it helps. Focusing on the preparation helps with nerves as well. We all feel nervous before presenting.
Yeah,
if somebody tells you, you know what, I get up on stage in person, online, and I feel nothing. I don't feel nervous at all. I'm skeptical. I'm a presentation coach. I give presentations all the time. We help others do the same. I feel nervous before presenting.
Yeah.
And the best way to control that is to know what you're talking about. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's almost like that initial first sentence, that initial thing looking to camera, or the initial remembering the name of a company or whatever it is. It's that once you get past that bit, then you just like relax into what you know. And I think I agree with you. And every single time I switch these cameras on or stand on stage or whatever,
you feel something.
You feel something. The 5 minutes before the call. I don't think that leaves you. I think it's a healthy thing to have.
Yeah.
So because it means you're not taking the situation lightly. And I think you should always think that way. Because I think you're showing a bit more subconsciously that healthy respect for the person that you're talking to. That's more like it.
And in a conversation, then it's a bit different. In a presentation, then when we talk about preparation, also what's so important is rehearsing. Most people don't rehearse. When I say rehearse, I'm not talking about a conversation like this.
Yeah.
But in a presentation, you want to repeat your presentation out loud, not in your head.
Yeah.
Out loud from the very beginning to the very end.
Yeah.
Without stopping, as if you have a real audience in front of you. That's what great presenters do.
Yeah.
And that's why they look confident.
Yeah.
Again, because of the preparation. Rehearsing is super important.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to that thing. It's that if I can see someone that can talk about it and they're not umming and ahhing, they're confident. You know that they know what they're talking about is real. They know that you're utilizing it and living it, so to speak. They're not making it up as they go along. And I think, there's that thing of, I'll just wing it. Well,
no,
it's not. It doesn't. It devalues you as a business or a presentation, just winging it all the time. And everyone knows that you're winging it as well.
And that's the thing. A lot of people think that when they wing it, that they're doing a good job because they are being authentic, they're being themselves. But then whether we are aware of it or not, the experience from the audience's perspective is not a positive one.
It's an interesting one. I'm thinking, as you're talking, my mind's going back to when I played football. So certainly for the first part of it, I played as a winger.
Me too.
Oh, okay. Where were you? Left, right?
So I'm right foot, but I like to do the opposite, to start from left so that I can come in and
whip it in the top corner. So one of the things coach taught me, he said, most own goals or goals are scored if you drill a ball low enough across a 6-yard box. And he said you'll see that if you drive it like hard and low, probably about the height of this coffee table actually, it's very hard to defend. So if you can get past the last man and whip it in hard, he said one or two things will happen. You'll find the guy that's running in on it 'cause he's expecting it, or it'll come off someone's leg and go fortunate, or even go in. And so I learned that, you see, and I was taught that. And eventually, every time I went round the player on the outside, that's my goal. And I just got better and better at hitting that ball across. And then it was like, and then I realized I had to get better at crossing, because sometimes I get there and then it's nothing worse than cutting the ball back and everyone's in front of the ball and you've cut it too far back towards the sort of like the edge of the penalty box rather than closer to the ball. And then it was just that repetition, that constant practice, that constant delivery. So it becomes subconscious. So by the time I was taking corners, I knew anything between the penalty spot and the edge of the 6-yard box. So I get it there. That's the holy grail, because someone will get on the end of it. You know, the goalkeepers hate defending it and defenders hate defending it there. And so I learned that over a period of time. And, you know, I would say the footballers or professional footballers are doing that every single moment, every single day. That's why they're so good at it. You know, I was just doing it as an amateur and playing that way. But it became a thing which is second nature. And I think the more you public speak, the more you do the rehearsal and the more you prepare, it just becomes part of the process. And therefore, then you do appear more confident.
100%.
100%. So, okay, last little thing. What tips could you give our audience in terms of public speaking? Because it's often talked about as like the worst thing to do, the most scary thing. I think dying is up there and then public speaking is next. So have you got any like top 5 tips that you could give people, our listeners, in terms of public speaking?
How much time do we have? No, just for me to
Oh,
think.
you could another 10
Okay.
minutes.
Okay, so number one, definitely the number one tip is, the first tip is, it's not your presentation, it's their presentation. It's always the audience's presentation. So we need to start, what that means is the very first thing we need to do in preparation for any presentation, even a conversation like this, is to start with the audience, to have an understanding of who they are, what their needs are, a little bit about the context. I'll give you an example, Daryl. Some time ago, we worked with a client. Her name is Marie from Paris. Marie is an executive. She's an expert in leadership. And she was invited by an association in Finland to give a talk about leadership. She was super excited. It was one of her first international speaking opportunities. So she prepared really well. She knew her message. We were talking about slides. She told us that she had prepared 50 beautiful slides, and she also rehearsed properly. So she was ready to go. She flew to Finland the day before the conference, then arrived there on the day, half an hour before the audience, because she wanted to make sure that she had time to set things up. And when she was about to connect her laptop to the screen, she realized that there was no screen. So a little bit of panic. She went and asked the organizers, assuming that they would say, "Oh, sorry, Marie, now we are going to find a screen for you." But what they did instead was they started laughing. And so she says, "Why are you laughing?" And they say, "Look, Marie, you want to show 50 slides, but actually you've been invited to give a talk to the association in Finland of blind people." Blind people.
Wow.
Now, Marie was very well prepared, apart from one thing.
Yeah.
She didn't know her audience. She didn't even take the time to translate the name of the association from Finnish to French.
Wow.
And she would have realized that perhaps there was no need to have 50 beautiful slides. The lesson for us is that if we want to make sure, we should want to make sure that our presentations are relevant to our audience, which is the most important principle of all. Relevance. It has to be relevant to the audience.
Yeah.
Before we open up PowerPoint, before we even think about what we want to communicate, we need to start with a strong understanding of the audience.
Yeah.
That's principle number one.
Yeah.
Another principle is that your objective is not to share information. A lot of people think that the objective of a presentation is to share some information. Mm-hmm. It's not. If you, don't get me wrong, if you want to share some information, that can be your objective sometimes. But if that's your only objective, there's no need to give a presentation.
Yeah.
Give them a document, give them a coffee, give them some time so that they can drink their coffee, they can read your document, you share some ideas, you answer some questions, much more effective.
Yeah.
When you give a presentation, it's because your objective goes beyond just sharing some information. Instead of information, the word we like to use in our company is transformation. You want to transform the audience, which doesn't have to be a huge thing.
Yeah.
You want to take them from a state where they don't know what you're talking about to a state in which they do.
Yeah.
Or from a state in which they don't believe in your ideas to a state in which they do. If after your presentation, your audience doesn't believe, feel, or do anything new or different, then you've wasted your time.
Yeah.
And even worse, you've wasted theirs. So the key question is, what do you want your audience to do after your presentation? Yeah. That's your objective.
No, it's great. I love it.
I can continue, but feel free to step in anytime.
The thing is, again, thinking of the audience, this podcast is about giving people as much value as possible in the area of purpose. So if someone that teaches this for a living can give 5 tips that revolutionize the way that they communicate, just thinking audience first, for example, then we've done our job. So that's why I'm saying, give us 5 things, because not only am I here to learn, but the people that are listening are here to learn, because they can go away and go, wow, I never knew that, or wow, that's changed the way I look at things, or you know what, I've not heard this stuff in terms of public speaking, which is great. So go on. Number 3.
Number 3,
no pressure.
You want to be able to simplify your message, which is very much connected. We said earlier that the number one problem I see is that we communicate a message which is either too complex, too technical, confusing for the audience.
Yeah.
We need to be able to simplify. I'll give you another example. If you think about writing, books, blogs, articles, newsletters, all experienced writers know that the key to great writing is not in what they say.
Yeah.
It's in what they don't say.
Yeah.
The more they remove, the better the article. You wrote a book, right? The more you remove, the better the book. The better the email. The same is true in communication. One of the mistakes I see so often again is, remember, we are so close to a subject that we think that everything is important. No, if everything is important, then nothing is important. So we need to be able to simplify our message. I'll give you a practical tool for our listeners. Think about your next presentation. How can you summarize the core idea behind that presentation in maximum 70 words? That's it, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I can promise you, if you can do that, then you are getting closer and closer to your ability to simplify your message. If not, your message isn't simple enough.
Yeah, I that's one of the things that I've learned, is that you can give a lot of people a lot of information and they almost like get, like cloudburst. It's just like a fog in front of them. All they can see is words.
Overwhelming.
Rather than just communicating that one thing that they leave with that they can take away and execute. So you could sit in a 45-minute meeting, for example, but if you can't think of one thing that you could apply to your life, exactly, you've just been soaking up information. You've been hearing, not necessarily listening, and then being able to apply it. So you need to help that end user or the person that's listening to give them something that they can literally take away and apply. So no, I absolutely get it.
You can also, I agree with you, the one thing, you can also use language, again, to make it practical. Say that you've given a good presentation, it was a good intro where you captured the audience's attention, then maybe you had your 3 key messages. 3 is a very powerful number in communication. Yeah. And then you get towards the end, you want to have a good punchline. You could approach that by saying something like, if there's one, you said one thing, right? If there's one thing, you can say, if there's one thing I would really like you to take away from this presentation, it's this. Yeah. And then you tell them, whatever you say next, they'll pay attention. Or similar thing, you can say, what I want you to remember is that, now whatever it is. Yeah. If you forget everything, but remember one thing, here is what I'd like you to remember. Yeah. So all of these things, whatever you say next, they'll pay attention.
Yeah, and I think it's the other thing that I've often found as well, and this is in any presentation, is the what next. Yeah. Give them the what next. And it's the same in business. If you've got a client that's done a piece of work with you, always show them what next looks like, because then you've taken them on with a journey. You're showing them it's not a transaction. This is a relationship that I want to build.
What next is very much connected to another tip I can give.
Number 4.
The mistake I see is that we get the call to action wrong way too often. So the what next, the call to action, what do you want your audience to do, often are calls to action are a bit too vague in general. We need to be more specific, which doesn't mean that you need to be salesy or pushy. No, but you want to be specific. I'll give you a before-after example. What I see, say for example that we give a webinar where we make it educational. It's a webinar, it's a presentation for potential clients. So we tell them how to become better presenters. And then at the end, you want to invite them to a next step, in case they want to learn a little bit more. People say things like, okay, if you want to learn a little bit more, just let me know and we can have a bit of a chat, or send me an email, we can have a bit of a chat. So the call to action is very general. The problem with that is that even if there is somebody in the audience who is interested in doing something to take the next step, they don't know what to do to express their interest.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are more specific and you say something like, look, if this speaks to you, and in general, if you enjoyed this session, and if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how what we've covered today could work for you, then at the moment I have an opportunity for 3 complimentary consultations to see if there might be a fit between what you may be looking for and what we have to offer. And regardless of whether or not there's a good fit, I can promise you that if you attend the consultation, you'll walk away with much greater clarity on how you can become a more confident presenter. If you're interested, just type yes in the chat. All you need to do is type yes in the chat. And then if you type yes, what I'll do, I'll get in touch. I'll give you more information about what the consultation is about. And then if we understand that potentially it's a good fit, then we'll go ahead and find a time. The difference here, apart from everything I said, is type yes in the chat. Now they know it could be something else, but they know that if they want to take the next step, all they need to do is they know what they need to do. They just need to type yes in the chat. So my invitation is for people to be more specific with that calls to action. Yeah,
I see it this way. It's not seeing a call to action. See it as a cause to action. See it as a way of communicating how they might join your movement, join your tribe, so to speak, because people want to belong. So if they realize that through your presentation, for example, there's a whole load of people that are learning how to communicate for the first time, then come and join other people that are exactly in the same position that you're in, and we can learn together. Is more intriguing than can you just click on their website or scan that QR code? Because it's throwaway, and they put their phone up and they're trying to it doesn't work, and then they just leave. They probably remember the QR code that they couldn't scan more than that one thing that you talked about, because it's just a pain. So just being simple and saying yes, and you can download chats online and stuff.
Exactly,
and follow it through. Okay, so the last one.
The last one is connected to what we said earlier about confidence coming from preparation, because it's such an important principle. The importance of the process. We need to, if you want to become a more confident presenter, you need to follow a process. Again, that confidence doesn't come from wishful thinking. We said it comes from familiarity, from preparation. And it comes from the process you follow. There's a structured way of thinking about presenting, from understanding the audience and their needs, to brainstorming in a structured way to identify your key messages, to translating your key messages into a clear and engaging storyline from the very beginning, where you want to grab the audience's attention, to the very end. From, if we need slides, for example, we don't have to use them all the time, but when we do, we want to avoid the typical death by PowerPoint. People can't read and listen at the same time. So the illustration side of things. And then the last step is connection. You were talking about moving away from slides because you wanted to have a better connection with the audience. Yes. And that comes with delivery skills, rehearsing, making that connection with the audience. So there's a structured way of thinking about presenting. Not going through a certain process is what often creates discomfort when we are in front of an audience.
It's the emphasis on the presentation, where they're spending more time on the presentation rather than the delivery, which I think a lot of presenters get into. So they're up to like 2 a.m. trying to make this PowerPoint look glorious, and they've spent 0 time on actually delivery. I think that's the biggest thing that I can see. As soon as you see a PowerPoint where it's full of text and stuff like that, you know that they spent more time on that than the more time of standing in front and sharing. I think the process that you're talking about gives people clarity, and it's that clarity that brings confidence. And for me, when you're clear, when you know what these steps are, if you follow these steps, Therefore, you will become more confident because you're following a formula that works. And when you deliver it, you go, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah. And I see exactly the scenario that you've described. And I would say not only do they spend 0 time on that delivery, they also spend 0 time or almost 0 time really thinking about the message they want to get across. They just put together some slides and they just open up PowerPoint or any other presentation tool. It doesn't make any difference, and put together some slides. But even before that, what is it that you want to communicate? Are you doing it in a simple way? Is it clear for the audience to understand and remember? Is it engaging? Is it relevant to them? That's the message. Then on top of that, you've got the delivery. And then maybe, yes, the illustration side of things, and you want to do it well as well.
I think also with the other thing, because there's 2 ways of looking at the keynote. You could provide it before or provide it after the event and just focus on the story and the delivery of who you are. So we went into a presentation, I think it was last week, and you know, they do that all the time. They do presentations because they're a training organization. So we're like, well, let's just send them the stuff beforehand and let's just focus in on our personal journeys, what led us to there. And it was such an easy conversation. So this hour-long meet, well, it's probably, I think we had about 40 minutes, but I remember the clock going up there. But because we were sharing our story and it went on for an hour and a half, you know, and they really enjoyed it. You know, we didn't even go, oh, wow, that was, you know, we just wasted an hour and a half. It was generally everyone was invested in their stories. So they started, the 3 other people in the conversation started sharing their stories. And we all left like, wow, we can all work together and make an impact and a difference. So,
and that's a great approach. So you've treated your presentation as a handout that you gave. It could be before, it could be after. And that's such a powerful approach. What people often do is they combine the two. They don't separate. Slides and documents or handouts are 2 different things. They should be separated. For example, you will never use your toothbrush to comb your hair. Bad example if we look at it.
Example for us.
But you would never do that, right? Just because it has bristles, like a hairbrush. You will never do that. Slides and documents are not the same thing, and they should be separated. That's what great presenters do. They separate.
And that's the common mistake I see. They're using the handout at the end. They're using the same document to send. And that's like with all the information in there, and you're using it because you're not confident, so you're reading off the slides with the back of your head to the audience. You know, it's those sorts of things that you see. So listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, Andrea. It's been really cool, and I'm sure the people listening will have a lot of value. So thank you for taking your time, driving all the way here from London, and we'll let you know when it's out, and you can show and share as many people as you can. That'd be amazing.
I will do. Thank you very much. The pleasure was mine.
Hey everybody, thank you for listening to the Purpose People podcast. We'd love you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also follow us on Apple, Spotify, Google and Amazon podcast platforms. A review is really helpful for us to get the message so you can make purpose a priority.